August 19, 1944. Wehrmacht Headquarters. East Prussia General Oberst. Alfred Jodl examined the latest intelligence from the crumbling Western Front. His staff had carefully analyzed the numbers behind the Allied advance. Supply lines now stretched more than 400 miles from the Normandy beaches to General Patton's rapidly advancing Third Army. The Americans, they concluded, had outpaced their logistics. Patton's forces would soon be forced to stop. Within days, perhaps hours. No army, they reasoned, could maintain such speed without adequate fuel. From Hitler's Wolfschanze headquarters, Jodl understood what every experienced German officer knew. Armored divisions consumed massive amounts of fuel. A single one used about 150,000 gallons per day while advancing. Now, with the Americans hundreds of miles from their depots, the outcome seemed clear. Patton's momentum would collapse, giving the Wehrmacht time to regroup along the Seine and possibly hold the line through winter. But what Jodl didn't know was that 125 miles away, nearly 6,000 trucks were already on the move, driving eastward in a continuous stream, headlights blazing against standard military rules, hauling 12,500 tons of supplies each day. This was the Red Ball Express, a logistics operation so bold that it defied every principle of German military science. It would soon overturn all assumptions about mechanized warfare. Within 72 hours, Patton's supposedly stalled tanks would smash through German defenses along the Seine. Within a week, they would liberate Paris. And within a month, they would reach Germany's border. The Wehrmacht's top strategists were about to witness a lesson in logistics that would redefine modern warfare, delivered by 23,000 truck drivers, nearly three-quarters of whom were African American. These men transformed a one-way highway network into the most efficient military supply system in history. The German command's belief in America's logistical limits was rooted in its own wartime experience. The Wehrmacht had pioneered blitzkrieg tactics and mastered combined arms warfare, but its campaigns repeatedly stalled when supply lines failed. In Russia, the German advance had slowed not from Soviet strength at first, but because supplies couldn't keep up. Trucks broke down on poor roads. Horse-drawn wagons, still 80% of German transport, lagged far behind, and rail gauge differences left stockpiles stranded hundreds of miles from the front. General der Panzertruppe Heinrich von Luttwitz, who would later command the 47th Panzer Corps, wrote in July 1944, "The Americans face the same logistical impossibility we did in Russia. Their mechanical advantage will become a burden. Machines require constant fuel, ammunition, and maintenance. They have advanced 400 miles in 30 days. History tells us what follows. Paralysis." German intelligence tracked U.S. consumption carefully. A single Sherman tank burned half a mile per gallon on roads, even worse off-road. An infantry division required 700 tons of supplies daily. An armored division needed 1,000. Patton led 12 divisions on a 60-mile front. The math seemed impossible. 12,000 tons per day, transported over 400 miles of damaged roads and bridges through territory the Germans had sabotaged during their retreat. General Major Siegfried Westphal, later Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt, concluded on August 20th that even if the Americans had unlimited trucks, which they didn't, and perfect roads, which they didn't, and no breakdowns, which was impossible, Patton's advance could not continue beyond 2 days. Physical laws, he noted, cannot be broken, not even by American industry. Yet, at 2 p.m. on August 25, 1944, in a requisitioned French chateau near Le Mans, Lieutenant Colonel Laurent Ayers of the Motor Transport Service addressed a skeptical group of officers. The figures were daunting. Patton's army was consuming supplies faster than any in history, moving at a speed no existing logistics plan could sustain. Traditional systems, railways, scheduled convoys, depot-based distribution, had completely collapsed under the pressure. "Gentlemen," Ayers said, "we're creating a one-way highway from Cherbourg to the front lines. Every truck will run 20 hours a day. No stops except for fuel or emergencies. We'll move at least 12,500 tons daily. The name came from railroad slang. A Red Ball shipment meant express priority. The Red Ball Express would follow the same rule. Total priority, no delays, no exceptions. The plan broke every German convention. 2 parallel one-way routes. One for loaded trucks heading forward, one for empties returning. Continuous 24-hour movement, headlights on despite blackout regulations. 5-minute convoy spacing, a 35 mph average speed. Mobile repair units every 50 miles, and military police removing any truck that fell below 25 mi. Patton's Colonel Charles O. Thrasher, who commanded the Advanced Section Communications Zone, reviewed the figures. 140 truck companies, 5,158 vehicles, and 90% operational readiness. Impossible, he said, by any logistics textbook ever written. Yet within 36 hours, that impossibility became reality. On August 26, 1944, drivers of the 39 16th Quartermaster Truck Company climbed into their GMC CCKW deuce-and-a-half trucks, loaded with artillery shells bound for Patton's guns 300 miles away at Melun. The composition of the Red Ball Express defied Nazi racial ideology. Of its 23,000 drivers, about 75% were African American soldiers, men serving in a segregated army, denied access to the same restaurants or facilities as white troops back home, yet powering the Army's advance across Europe. They built their own identity within hours. Slogans appeared on truck sides. Patton's Blood Bank, Hitler, Here We Come, Detroit to Berlin Express. They made their own road rules. Slower vehicles pulled over immediately. Broken trucks were pushed aside, and any vehicle dropping below 20 mph was treated as a hazard. By August 28th, German reconnaissance began reporting something entirely new, a non-stop column of American trucks stretching beyond the horizon. The numbers were real, and they were rising fast. By September 5th, the Red Ball Express had achieved a pace that seemed impossible to German logistics officers, who still depended on horse-drawn wagons for 80% of their transport. Convoys rolled out every 5 minutes from the western terminus. Each convoy averaged 67 trucks, carrying loads of 5 tons per vehicle, often overloaded to 7. Covering the 350-mile route one way took about 14 hours, with a 2-hour turnaround at each end. At any moment, nearly 5,000 vehicles were on the move. The Red Ball Express evolved constantly, as drivers and mechanics solved problems that German engineers considered unsolvable. Around 1,800 trucks broke down daily, but mobile repair teams worked along the roads, fixing what they could in 15 minutes, or pushing disabled vehicles aside. Parts were salvaged from trucks deemed beyond repair. Engines were replaced in just 45 minutes using mobile cranes. When the main Red Ball route grew congested, drivers improvised alternate paths. They seized French buses to transport troops and free trucks for cargo, repainted captured German vehicles in olive drab, and pressed them into service. Destroyed bridges were bypassed by building new roads from the rubble of bombed towns. To the Germans, this organized chaos was incomprehensible. Their logistics doctrine demanded strict schedules, maintenance routines, and methodical planning. The Americans ignored nearly every rule, yet their system didn't collapse. It accelerated. The most astonishing revelation for German observers was American fuel management. The Red Ball Express burned through 300,000 gallons of gasoline daily just to sustain itself, more than many entire German armies received for all uses. Yet, the Americans never ran short. They had built another logistical marvel, Operation Pluto, an underwater fuel pipeline laid across the English Channel. By September 1944, gasoline flowed unseen beneath the sea. German intelligence hadn't even detected it. Along the Red Ball route, forward fuel dumps were established every 25 miles, while tanker convoys ensured that no truck waited longer than 10 minutes to refuel. General Major Walter Warlimont, reviewing aerial photos, remarked, "The Americans have fuel depots larger than our entire reserves. They burn more gasoline moving gasoline than we allocate to full panzer divisions. This isn't war as we know it, it's industrial overflow." The Red Ball Express didn't just sustain Patton's advance, it amplified it. German doctrine predicted an armored division could advance 20 to 30 miles daily under ideal conditions. Supplied by the Red Ball Express, Patton's forces averaged 40-60 miles a day for weeks. On September 1, 1944, the 4th Armored Division advanced 35 miles in the morning, refueled at noon, then pushed another 32 miles before dusk, a 67-mile advance in one day. German defensive plans, built around a 30-mile-per-day maximum, collapsed instantly. General Oberst Heinz Guderian, reviewing these reports in East Prussia, dismissed them at first. "No armored force can advance 60 miles a day for a week," he said. "It must be propaganda." But intercepted American radio transmissions confirmed it. And worse, the Americans weren't even encrypting their positions. They were so confident in their pace that secrecy seemed unnecessary. By September 5, 1944, German intelligence had fully analyzed the Red Ball Express. The findings were devastating. Every assumption about American logistics had to be revised. The reports defied every principle of German military science. Americans wasted vehicles, abandoning damaged ones instead of repairing them. Drivers used stimulants and operated without rest. Camouflage was ignored, leaving convoys exposed to air attack that never came. Mechanical failure rates exceeded 30% daily, yet sheer redundancy kept the system running. Fuel used that would bankrupt any European army barely slowed them. Field Marshal Walter Model summed up the grim reality. "If these reports are true, we face not just a superior army, but a superior civilization. They don't hide because they don't fear us. They waste because their resources are limitless. We cannot defeat such power with tactics." The Red Ball drivers paid a hidden price for this success. Many worked 72-hour shifts, hallucinating from exhaustion and benzodrine. Over 300 drivers were killed during the operation, victims of collisions, overturned trucks, and fires from overheated engines. Yet morale remained remarkably high. Most of these men were African Americans, denied equal rights at home but determined to prove Hitler's racial theories wrong with every mile driven and every ton delivered. Captured German officers later admitted their shock. Oberst Hans von Luck, taken prisoner in September 1944, told interrogators, "We knew we'd lost once we understood your supply system. You break every rule, waste fuel, abandon trucks, exhaust men. Yet you succeed through sheer scale. You've turned war into an industry." The psychological effect on German troops was severe. Every night they heard the endless roar of American engines, knowing that each truck carried the means of their defeat. While German soldiers rationed 3 bullets per rifle, Americans delivered ammunition by the millions. The sound itself became a weapon, a reminder of unstoppable power. The trucks symbolized America's industrial strength. The GMC CCKW-2 1-2-ton truck, the backbone of the Red Ball Express, embodied mass production efficiency. Over 500,000 were built by war's end, more than all German military vehicles combined. These trucks featured innovations Germany hadn't widely adopted: standard all-wheel drive, automatic tire inflation, waterproofing for deep fording, engines that ran on low-grade fuel, and heaters that worked in sub-zero conditions. Even more striking was the American philosophy of maintenance. Germans rebuilt engines. Americans replaced them. Germans rationed parts. Americans scrapped entire vehicles for small issues. Where the Wehrmacht relied on master mechanics, the U.S. Army had thousands of skilled workers capable of handling 80% of all repairs. As the front advanced east, the Red Ball Express adapted instantly, a flexibility that left German planners, used to weeks of preparation, utterly stunned. When the original supply route to Chartres could no longer handle the demand, the Americans swiftly established several Red Ball Express extensions overnight. The White Ball Express ran from Rouen to Paris. The Green Diamond linked Cherbourg to railroad transfer points. The Red Lion connected Bayeux to Brussels, and the ABC line ran from Antwerp through Brussels to Charleroi. Each of these new supply routes became operational within just 48 hours of planning, a feat that took German staff officers weeks to coordinate. The American approach was simple yet revolutionary. Paint new markers, assign trucks, and start moving. What puzzled German observers even more was the dominance of African American drivers in these operations. Nazi racial ideology claimed that black people were inferior, incapable of complex technical tasks or leadership. Yet, these very drivers were performing logistical feats that the Germans could not replicate. The irony was not lost on the African American soldiers themselves. They knew exactly what the Nazis thought of them, which only fueled their determination. Every mile they drove was a direct refutation of Hitler's racist ideology, proof that they could outperform those who sought to belittle them. They weren't just delivering supplies, they were delivering a powerful message. Some German prisoners assigned to load Red Ball trucks saw their beliefs shattered. They worked under African American sergeants who could calculate load weights faster than German engineers, spoke clearer English than their own instructors, and treated them with fairness, contradicting everything Nazi propaganda had taught them. The Red Ball Express demanded infrastructure that German engineers had considered impossible under active combat. Yet American engineers built or reinforced 40 bridges, created 15 major fuel depots, established 26 maintenance stations, and constructed 8 temporary driver cities, all while the operation was running. When German forces destroyed the bridge at Monte to halt the American advance, they estimated that rebuilding it would take 6 weeks. American engineers finished a temporary replacement in just 14 hours, and Red Ball convoys were only briefly delayed, rerouting through hastily bulldozed detours. German observers watched in disbelief. There were no elaborate planning sessions or detailed blueprints, only immediate, decisive action. The Americans built faster than the Germans could destroy, creating roads, depots, and bridges that seemed to appear overnight across the French countryside. One accomplishment particularly astonished German artillery officers: the American ammunition supply rate. U.S. artillery units fired without restraint, a luxury no German battery had enjoyed since 1942. During the reduction of the Metz fortifications in September 1944, one corps alone fired 100,000 rounds in 24 hours. The Red Ball Express delivered every shell, plus a 20% surplus. In contrast, German artillery defending Metz was rationed to 50 rounds per gun per day. The imbalance was overwhelming. German analysts calculated that the American bombardment required 50 truckloads of ammunition per hour. Yet the Red Ball Express sustained it effortlessly. This relentless pace came at a cost. By late September, vehicle attrition had reached staggering levels. The average truck lifespan dropped from 30,000 miles to 10,000, and 30% of all vehicles were sidelined daily. Each week, 500 engines and 10,000 tires were replaced, and more than 5,000 vehicles were destroyed or abandoned. Yet the operation never slowed. American industry had anticipated such losses. Ships arrived weekly with replacement trucks, and new drivers were trained in just 2 days before being deployed into active convoys. German intelligence was stunned. Their calculations showed that the Americans were losing more trucks each week than the Wehrmacht, possessed in all of France, yet U.S. transport capacity continued to rise. The Americans had achieved what the Germans considered impossible: logistics faster than consumption. Along the Red Ball routes, French civilians witnessed this abundance firsthand. After years of German occupation and scarcity, they saw convoys of food, fuel, and supplies rolling endlessly toward the front. The psychological impact was immense. African American drivers often shared their rations with locals, offering chocolate, cigarettes, and soap to children despite strict regulations. The contrast with the German occupiers was stark. Americans freely gave away what the Germans had rationed so tightly. German intelligence reported the devastating propaganda effect. Civilians now believed that American victory was inevitable, citing the Red Ball convoys as proof. Resistance activity along the routes surged by 400%. Populations that had once tolerated German rule now turned against it. In early September 1944, the Red Ball Express faced its greatest strain. General Patton's Third Army had advanced so far that even the massive supply chain began to falter. Round trips stretched beyond 700 miles. Drivers collapsed from exhaustion. Trucks broke down, and German intelligence took notice. On September 8th, a German staff report noted, "American supply lines show signs of collapse. Convoy intervals have increased, and vehicle speeds have decreased. This is our opportunity." But once again, American adaptability proved decisive. Within 72 hours, the Red Ball Express reorganized completely, establishing transfer points to halve journey distances, rotating drivers, building forward maintenance bases, and doubling vehicle numbers. By September 12th, the tonnage delivered to the front had increased, not decreased. What should have been a logistical breakdown instead became a demonstration of American ingenuity and resilience. The Red Ball Express not only survived its crisis, it emerged stronger than before. Supporting the Red Ball Express, the Americans launched another logistical innovation the Germans considered impossible: large-scale aerial resupply. C-47 transport aircraft began flying critical cargo directly to the front lines, each carrying around 3 tons of supplies. On September 16, 1944, Wehrmacht observers counted 900 flights in a single day, delivering 2,700 tons by air. By comparison, even at its height, the Luftwaffe had only managed 300 tons daily during the Battle of Stalingrad, calling it their maximum effort. The Americans treated transport aircraft as if they were trucks. Unconcerned with fighter escorts or fuel shortages, they accepted losses and compensated with numbers. The Wehrmacht simply couldn't match this scale of industrial power. The Red Ball Express also challenged German military tradition. It operated under command principles that defied the rigid hierarchy of the German army. Junior officers made decisions usually reserved for generals, while sergeants oversaw operations larger than those managed by German colonels. This decentralization astonished German observers. To them, American logistics appeared chaotic. Yet it worked. Every lieutenant acted like a general, every sergeant like a colonel. Instead of confusion, this flexibility produced unmatched efficiency. The German army, bound by strict hierarchy, couldn't adapt fast enough. By October 1944, advancing rail lines began to reduce the need for the Red Ball Express. What was meant to last 10 days continued for 82, delivering over 412,000 tons of supplies across 122 million ton miles. German commanders fighting on their own soil reflected on what they'd seen. Field Marshal Walter Model later wrote, "We were not defeated primarily by American tanks or planes. We were defeated by American trucks." The Red Ball Express proved that in modern warfare, logistics is strategy. Even the transition to rail transport was remarkable. American railroad engineers rebuilt 1,000 miles of destroyed French railways while the convoys were still running. They laid track faster than the Germans could destroy it. Often, using captured German rail equipment, the final statistics defied German understanding of logistics. Days of operation: 412, 193. Tons delivered: 222 million ton-miles covered. Nearly 6,000 vehicles on average, peaking at 7,000, 23,000 drivers employed, 100,000. Gallons of fuel used daily, 40,000 tons of ammunition delivered to Patton's army, 15 million rations transported, 135,000 tons of medical supplies moved in captivity. German officers later admitted they had calculated American capacity based on European standards. They multiplied their own best results by 3, and still underestimated U.S. performance by a factor of 10. But beyond numbers, the Red Ball Express shattered the Germans' faith in their own military superiority. Officers who had once mocked Americans as soft and overly reliant on machinery watched those same troops perform logistical miracles through determination and industry. German POWs often stood silently at camp fences, counting the endless stream of Red Ball trucks. Some even wept, realizing the truth. America could waste more than Germany could produce. Their worldview collapsed. one truck at a time. The operation also forced an unexpected reckoning within the U.S. Army. Its success depended heavily on African American soldiers, who were still segregated and denied equal treatment. During a September 1944 inspection, General Eisenhower personally witnessed their endurance. His aide, Captain Harry Butcher, recorded his words, "These men are winning the war as surely as any infantrymen. We must rethink many things." This acknowledgement helped build momentum toward military desegregation 3 years later. In France, black soldiers had proven what they already knew. Given opportunity and tools, they could equal anyone. The Red Ball Express was their battlefield, and they won it with distinction. German racial theorists had no explanation for this. SS journals stopped mentioning American logistics entirely. The evidence was too clear and too damaging. After the war, German military engineers studied Red Ball operations intensely. Their conclusions reshaped global logistics. Strategy, mass volume beats inefficiency. Redundancy prevents. Collapse decentralization enables speed standardization. Multiplies capacity human endurance exceeds expectations. Former Chief of Staff Franz Halder later wrote in 1950, "The Red Ball Express proved that logistics determines strategy, not the other way around." Americans understood this. We learned too late. Among the 23,000 Red Ball drivers were countless acts of courage that baffled German analysts. Verified reports included Corporal John L. Houston, who drove for 48 continuous hours, delivering ammunition to the 2nd Armored Division, falling asleep 3 times at the wheel, but continuing after comrades revived him. Private Booker T. Washington, whose truck caught fire from overheated brakes while carrying medical supplies. Instead of abandoning it, he drove the burning vehicle 2 miles to a field hospital, saving crucial supplies and countless lives. These stories, repeated thousands of times, revealed a distinctly American military culture. Individual initiative, calculated risk, and mission success over rigid compliance. In desperation, Germany attempted to copy the system during the Battle of the Bulge. Operation Greif included plans to use captured American trucks for their own supply lines. The effort collapsed almost instantly. German drivers couldn't match American speeds, mechanics couldn't repair U.S. vehicles, and their fuel reserves couldn't sustain such consumption. The operations commander reported bitterly, "We captured 50 American trucks. Within a week, 30 were deadlined. Americans would have replaced them. We tried to repair them. That difference explains our defeat." The winter of 1944-45 brought the final test. Freezing rain and snow should have halted all movement. German doctrine stated wheeled logistics were impossible below 10 degrees C. Yet the Red Ball Express kept rolling. Drivers chained tires, poured alcohol into radiators, and pressed forward. Speed dropped from 35 to 15 km/h, but supplies still arrived. German observers were astonished. American convoys moved through blizzards that had immobilized entire panzer divisions. By German standards, it was messy and inefficient, yet it was also unstoppable. In May 1945, captured German logistics officers were required to study Red Ball operations. Their findings were unanimous and devastating to their pride. General Friedrich Schulz wrote, "The Red Ball Express represents warfare we never imagined. The Americans created a temporary civilization. Thousands of men, vehicles, and millions of tons of supplies that existed solely to sustain armies, then vanished when no longer needed. We built permanent infrastructure over years. They built superior temporary systems in days." And General Heinz Guderian, architect of German armored warfare, delivered the most telling conclusion. "We invented blitzkrieg, but we never solved its greatest limitation, logistics." Americans confronted the problem through a scale of industrial excess once thought impossible. The Red Ball Express wasn't simply a supply route. It was a relentless river of materials that overwhelmed German forces. The operation cost the United States around $100 million in 1944, covering destroyed vehicles, consumed fuel, damaged roads, and French claims for compensation. To German staff officers who had long worked under conditions of scarcity, such a figure was incomprehensible. Yet to the Americans it was considered economical. The Red Ball Express directly contributed to the capture of 400,000 German soldiers, the liberation of France, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and shortened the war in Europe by roughly 6 months. At that time, each additional day of war cost the United States $250 million. By that measure, the Red Ball Express effectively paid for itself within a single day of shortened conflict. Lieutenant General John C. H. Lee, head of logistics for the European theater, famously stated, "We wore out 5,000 trucks and 23,000 men to destroy the German army in France." In any earlier war, that would have been catastrophic losses. In an American industrial war, that's acceptable overhead. One of the unexpected legacies of the Red Ball Express was its transformative influence on post-war civilian logistics. Thousands of returning drivers brought home first-hand experience from running what was then the world's largest transportation network. These veterans went on to establish trucking companies, contribute to the design of the interstate highway system, and shape the foundations of modern American logistics. Companies like Yellow Freight, Roadway, and Consolidated Freightways were founded by Red Ball veterans who had learned that in logistics, volume beats efficiency, speed surpasses perfection, and if trucks keep rolling 24 hours a day, you can move the world. Military historians today widely acknowledge the Red Ball Express as the decisive logistical operation of the European campaign. Without it, Patton's rapid advance would have stalled, Paris would have fallen weeks later, and German forces could have re-established their winter defensive lines. The operation validated America's military doctrine that emphasized logistics over tactics. While German officers studied Clausewitz and the art of battlefield maneuver, Americans studied Detroit assembly lines and railroad timetables. The Red Ball Express proved that in modern warfare, the ability to sustain supply lines matters more than tactical brilliance. On September 15, 1944, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the German commander in the West, received detailed intelligence on the Red Ball Express. After hours of review, he addressed his staff. "Gentlemen, we face something beyond military solution. The Americans have created a supply system that renders distance meaningless. Our entire strategy depends on their advance outpacing their supplies. That point no longer exists. They have revolutionized warfare, and we are fighting the last war." His operations officer, General Hans Speidel, proposed targeting the Red Ball routes using the remaining Luftwaffe aircraft. Rundstedt's response captured the hopelessness of the situation. "With what shall we interdict? They have 6,000 trucks. If we destroy 1,000, which we cannot, they'll replace them within a week. We would need to eliminate 200 trucks daily just to keep pace with their production. We don't even have 200 aircraft left." Behind the staggering statistics were human stories that astonished German observers. Drivers who hadn't slept for days refused rest because their convoys had to keep moving. Mechanics worked through freezing rain to keep the trucks running. Teenagers lied about their age just to be part of the effort. Such stories multiplied across the operation, creating a legend that both inspired Americans and demoralized German forces. The Germans realized that the Americans were not the soft people their propaganda had claimed. They drove themselves harder than Germans drove horses, but they did so by choice, not compulsion. That made them far more dangerous than German doctrine ever accounted for. The Red Ball Express inadvertently became one of the most powerful psychological weapons of the war. German troops could hear the convoys rumbling through the night, endless engines that never seemed to stop. The sound alone became a form of psychological warfare. Reports even surfaced of German soldiers hearing phantom convoys that weren't real, an auditory illusion that reflected their despair. Knowing that the Americans possessed unlimited supplies while they rationed their last ammunition broke German morale. Recognizing this effect, American psychological warfare units began broadcasting recorded truck engine sounds toward German lines, amplifying the illusion even when no convoys were nearby. The Germans reported these phantom convoys as genuine, proving the deep psychological damage inflicted by the Red Ball Express. By November 1944, with railways partially restored, the Red Ball Express was officially shut down. But its methods had permanently transformed military logistics. The philosophy of continuous, high-volume, wasteful yet overwhelmingly effective supply became the cornerstone of American doctrine. The final innovation was the speed of dissolution. Within 72 hours, the entire operation, 23,000 men, 6,000 vehicles, and hundreds of installations, was disbanded. Personnel were reassigned, trucks redistributed, and routes turned back over to civilian use. In contrast, German forces required months to organize smaller-scale operations and years to dismantle them. Americans built what they needed, used it, discarded it, and built something better. When Germany finally surrendered in May 1945, many senior German officers specifically cited the Red Ball Express as evidence that resistance had become hopeless. General Hasso von Manteuffel remarked during interrogation, "When we understood your logistics capacity, we knew the war was lost. You could supply armies faster than we could destroy them." The Red Ball Express was a weapon against which we had no defense. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, one of Germany's most capable commanders, was asked what had surprised him most about American forces. His reply was simple: "Not your tanks, not your planes, but your trucks." The Red Ball Express showed us that you had militarized your entire society's production. We weren't fighting your army, we were fighting your factories. The statistics of the Red Ball Express tell the story of industrial warfare at its peak. Total cargo delivered 412, 193 tons. Total distance covered 122 million ton-miles. Average trucks in operation daily 5,958, peaking at over 7,000. Total drivers 23,000. Operating duration 82 days. Fuel consumed 57 million gallons. Tires worn out 180,000. Vehicles destroyed over 5,000. Total cost $100 million. German divisions defeated through supply advantage 47 estimated. War days shortened 180. These figures mark a turning point in the evolution of warfare, when industrial capacity became more decisive than tactical genius, and when logistics dictated strategy rather than merely supporting it. In 1994, on the 50th anniversary of D-Day, the U.S. Postal Service issued a commemorative stamp honoring the Red Ball Express at the National Postal Museum in Washington, D.C. The ceremony recognized an operation often overshadowed by battlefield heroics, but equally crucial to Allied victory. Veterans in attendance spoke proudly of their contribution, an effort that showcased America's industrial strength and the determination of its people to overcome every obstacle. Most of the drivers were African American soldiers, serving in segregated units and often denied recognition during the war. Yet they had delivered victory at 35 miles per hour. The Red Ball Express proved that in modern warfare, logistics isn't secondary. It is the war effort itself. It demonstrated that a democratic, industrial society could mobilize resources on a scale no totalitarian regime could match. German generals who had once laughed at American wastefulness were ultimately silenced by 6,000 trucks delivering 12,500 tons of supplies daily across 700 miles of liberated France. They had expected Americans to follow European caution, conserve resources, advance methodically, but instead faced a logistics tidal wave that buried German defenses under Allied abundance. The Red Ball Express's success wasn't born of genius, but of qualities deeply rooted in American character. Mechanical skill, adaptability, improvisation, and above all, the initiative of individuals who acted decisively without waiting for orders. Something unimaginable in the rigid German command structure. In his memoirs, General George S. Patton, whose Third Army relied heavily on the Red Ball Express, paid them the ultimate tribute. The truck drivers of the Red Ball Express deserved as much credit for the defeat of Germany as any combat unit. They drove through exhaustion, through breakdowns, through weather that halted tanks. Without them, the Third Army doesn't move. Without movement, we don't win. They were black soldiers, mostly, segregated and unrecognized, but they won the war as surely as any rifleman. History must record this truth. That truth remains the enduring legacy of the Red Ball Express. 23,000 mostly African-American drivers, 6,000 trucks, and one one-way road to victory. They achieved what German military science declared impossible, keeping advancing armies supplied faster than physics should allow, sustaining momentum beyond human endurance, and proving that in modern warfare, the side with the most trucks ultimately defeats the side with the best. Tactics. German generals who once mocked American logistics as wasteful and unsustainable surrendered just 82 days later to armies powered by those same trucks. They learned the hard truth. American trucks had defeated German tanks, industrial abundance had overwhelmed military precision, and logistics had evolved into strategy itself. The Red Ball Express officially ended on November 16, 1944, but its legacy echoed through history. It demonstrated that in the industrial age, victory belongs not to the boldest soldiers or the most brilliant commanders, but to the nation that can deliver the most supplies, the farthest, the fastest. The German generals who left in August 1944 were signing surrender documents by May 1945, defeated by 23,000 truck drivers who had redefined modern warfare at 35 miles per hour. Their story stands among the greatest military operations in history, not because it was flawless or elegant, but because it worked. The Red Ball Express kept Patton moving, kept the Germans retreating, and proved that in the age of mechanized war, convoys of trucks mattered more than columns of tanks. The roads of France still bear the scars of that massive effort. Ruts carved by overloaded trucks, bridges hastily repaired, and wrecks abandoned by the roadside. But the true monument to the Red Ball Express is the speed of Allied victory. Every day the war was shortened, saved thousands of lives, and the Express shortened it by months. In the end, the Germans who mocked American logistics learned the ultimate lesson of modern warfare. Amateurs talk tactics. Professionals talk logistics. Americans talk trucks. The Red Ball Express was America speaking, loud and clear, in the roar of 6,000 engines carrying democracy and destruction at 35 miles per hour down a one-way road to victory. The last word belongs to an anonymous German officer remembered through a Red Ball driver's recollection at the 1994 commemoration. Standing on a Belgian roadside, watching the endless flow of American trucks, he said in broken English, "We prepared for everything, your tanks, your planes, your ships. But we never prepared for your trucks. How do you fight an enemy who has more trucks than you have soldiers?" The answer rumbled past him every 5 minutes, driven by exhausted Americans who were rewriting the rules of warfare, one delivery at a time. The Red Ball Express turned logistics into strategy, supply into victory, and trucks into the most decisive weapon of the European war. The German generals stopped laughing once they realized this truth. But by then, Patton was already at their gates, supplied by the greatest logistics operation in military history.